Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, One Piecers? Welcome back to another video. This video is going to start our coverage for cards coming out in Set 2 Paramount War. This is something I always do for Dragon Ball when new sets come out and they reveal new cards. We go over them, talk about their competitive merit, and I'll give my perspective on them as a competitive card game player. We're going to do that in today's video. Today we're talking about the red cards coming out in Paramount War, and with the rate I plan to release these videos, I should have them out by the time the set comes out next month. And I feel like Set 1 is pretty much contented out to death, so I think getting into some Set 2 stuff will be pretty interesting. But anyways, we'll get into this. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. Down in the comments, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my takes in this video. And let's just jump right on in, starting with the Whitebeard Leader. First of all, I hate that they have him titled as Edward Newgate. Obviously, that's his real name, but I think Whitebeard sounds way cooler. But this is a super interesting leader. He is a 6k 6 life leader, which seems incredibly broken until you read at the end of your turn, add one card from the top of your life to your hand. So you're essentially playing on a clock. You have, assuming your opponent does no damage, which is not likely, but you have, let's say, 6 turns before you're automatically put down to 0 life, and then your opponent can just all in you for game. That, of course, doesn't count any normal damage your opponent does to you. But again, your leader is overstated as a result. This is a really cool thematic thing where, for where Whitebeard is at this point in the anime. It's a very, very cool theme that they're going with this leader. But it does seem very powerful because 6 turns is still quite a few. Again, like you can maybe like subtract 2 turns from that if your opponent's actually able to do a significant amount of damage to you. But your leader is very big with this 6k stat. And that's actually going to change the way that people play the game against this leader specifically, because as we talked about, you want to be swinging even numbers to even numbers and odd numbers to odd numbers. So every other leader in the game is 5k power. You're typically swinging 5s, 7s, and 9s at those types of leaders. This leader demands 6s, 8s, and 10s and numbers like that, because you want to swing 8 of this guy because it'll cost them a 2k and a 1k from hand in order to counter out of that. As where if you swing a typical 7 that you would swing at most other leaders, all that requires is 1 2k from Whitebeard to get out of this attack, right? So it is going to be a very interesting matchup thing where people have to play very differently against this leader. And I think this leader did pretty well in Set 2. I don't follow the Japan meta very closely to know exactly what decks are like top dog over there. And I still think there's some subject to change in terms of like when cards come to other regions and how players decide to use them and find out new combos and stuff. I think that things will certainly change from Japan to, this side of the world, other sides of the world. But yeah, this leader seems very, very strong, and I'm pretty sure it did well in Japan, at least in the beginning of the Set 2 meta. And then we have the alternate art. I'm kind of getting tired of the close-up faces. I think they're kind of weird. Some of them are pretty cool, like Dofi's is a really iconic one, but mostly because he's a sick and twisted character. This one of Whitebeard is a little bit weird, but yeah, it is what it is. Then we have the GARP Leader. So actually, I like his alternate art quite a bit because it's a very iconic scene from the anime. But anyways, this effect is very interesting. So this is actually a red-black leader, and black is a color being introduced in One Piece Set 2. So we have your turn. When this leader or one of your characters is given a Dawn, give up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost 7 or less, -1 cost during this turn. Okay, so a few things here. Black's gimmick in One Piece Set 2, which we're not really going to talk about most of the black cards today or any other black cards really, but we'll get into that when we cover the color black. But their theme seems to be reducing the cost of characters on board in order to remove them more easily. So this is an effect that is not once per turn. So if you're able to reduce the cost on something multiple times, you can play something that, let's say, kills a 4-drop. And if you reduce the cost of a 7-drop 3 times, you can now kill it as a 4-drop, which might be pretty interesting. I don't think black has done all that great in One Piece Set 2. I've seen some stuff with like the Z leader, but I think that's black purple if I'm not mistaken, which actually combos very nicely into this theme because black has a lot of removal at different costs. So being able to minus their cost and then play like a king 6, for example, and kill something, that does seem pretty good. But also interesting about this effect, this is the first time we've seen this timing of when something is given a Dawn, do X. I don't think we've seen that before at all in One Piece Set 1, and that's not once per turn either. So as long as you give something a Dawn, you can minus the cost of something else, which is a very cool combination to get something lowered in power to then kill it. I do think that's pretty interesting for sure. Then we have a 4-drop 6k, not a big deal, just a vanilla, but it is a Whitebeard, so that might be relevant for some searching later on. We have the Whitebeard Boss card. So this is a 9-drop 10k, very comparable to Shanks in Set 1 in terms of power, but his on play, up to one of your leaders gains plus 2k power till the start of your next turn. Okay, that alone is insane because in Dragon Ball we have Senzu Bean, which basically permanently increases the power of a card for a whole turn and makes it much harder to deal damage to. This is that. This is making your, at least Whitebeard Leader, 8k. So now it's just so much harder to actually inflict damage to that leader. And of course, this is playable in like Zoro or Luffy or any other deck. So this is a very powerful defensive card. And then the rest of that on play effect. Then you cannot add life to your hand using your own effects this turn. So that actually turns off the downside of Whitebeard for an entire turn, which is also just very powerful in that deck. Then we have Dawn 2 when attacking, KO one of your opponent's characters with 3,000 power or less. Honestly, for such a big card, that's a really weird like effect to have where you only can kill a 3k. I mean, I guess you can kill a blocker, so that's one of the big upsides of this thing, is killing a blocker. You can't really kill one of your opponent's major threats unless you reduce the power of that card somehow that turn. But yeah, overall, this seems like a really solid card. I mean, negating Whitebeard's downside and making your leader harder to deal damage to next turn, and establishing a 10k body, that seems huge to me. Next up, we have Dadeon, which is a card I believe that I've seen a lot in like red Zoro lists and stuff. It's a 2-drop 3k on play. Look at top 5 and add a red character at the cost of 1 to your hand. So for example, in Zoro, that's like Sunny-kun or red Nami, 1-drop Nami, both red 1-drop Namis. So this card does seem really good in terms of consistency. And in Zoro, this is basically a 2-drop 4k. So for 1 more Dawn, she is swinging for a threatening number. Seems pretty good. Then we have a 5/7, just good vanilla stat. A 6/8, again, just a vanilla. Seems to be a lot of vanillas for this set. It is only set 2, I guess. But anyways, this card, Jozu. So this is a 4/4 2k counter. So that alone might cause you to play this card. But this says, Dawn 1, if you have 2 or less life and your leader's type includes Whitebeard Pirates, which is Whitebeard basically, this character gains rush. So this is super interesting because we all know already that obviously that Whitebeard just like drops his own life anyway, and this is another rush card. So you can pair this with your 5-drop Luffy's, your 3-drop Zoros, and if you want to play a deck that just maximizes on rush, you can play this card, and there's really no downside because he has a 2k counter. So I find this card to be super interesting. I don't know if Whitebeard lists like played this card. I don't see why they wouldn't, but I don't know. To me, this card seems really good. And honestly, 1-drop equipping Nami seems good in this deck as well, because with the 9-drop Whitebeard's effect, it takes 2 Dawn, right? Obviously, you can't attack with him the turn you play him, but he does need 2 Dawn in order to get that effect to pop a 3-drop. So yeah, like this card, for example, you'd want to give it rush the same turn it's played. So if you have an equipping Nami out, you can play this for 4, give it a rest of Dawn from equipping Nami, and then swing with it if your life's 2 or less. That seems pretty good to me. Then we have Squad. So this is a 3/5 on play. If your leader is a Whitebeard Pirate, give one of your opponent's characters minus 4k during this turn, and add 1 card from the top of your life to your hand. So very costly effect, meaning that you have to take the life on top of that, because I don't think there's really a way you can play this and the Whitebeard 9-drop in the same turn. It's just too much Dawn. But this does allow you to give something minus 4k so that you can combo it with your leader swing and then pop it. So you can now pop pretty much anything that costs 7 or has 7k power or less. That's a pretty decent combo, but that life restriction or that life cost might be a little too steep. That one alarms me just a little bit. Then we have a nice alternate art for it. Moving along, I clicked out of the box. Okay, we have Dagora. So we have a 1/2 with a 1k counter. Activate main, you may rest this character. Play up to 1 red card other than Dagora from with a cost of 1 from your hand. This is a card that I've looked at actually for a little bit, and I find it very interesting because let's say you're playing Zoro, for example, and you go first. You can play this thing, tap it, play another 1-drop, and you know this thing pretty much can't get killed because your opponent can't attack on their first turn going second. So that seems like that seems to make this thing like a pretty safe play, but does that only make it good on turn 1? That's what has me a little bit hesitant about it. Like later in the game, it helps you flood a board, and then like if your opponent wants to swing into this, it essentially blocks an attack from your life, which is somewhat of a good thing. But yeah, again, you can like spam Sunny-kuns and spam other 1-drops like Nami and whatnot. Maybe it's good, but I feel like it's only best on turn 1 and maybe not so great after that. But definitely a card worth trying in red for sure to really flood out your board. Then we have Vista. We have a 3/3, so this is on play, KO a 3k power or less. So very similar to Nico Robin, but it does not have to attack. It's an on play. He is a little bit weaker as a result, but I think on play versus on attack is really good because you don't have to worry about waiting that whole extra turn cycle in order to get this guy's effect off. He just gets it off immediately. And again, in Zoro, this guy is already starting off as a 3/4, so you can just equip 1 Dawn to him. He'll be a 3/5, and he has 1k counter. So to me, this card has a lot of upside compared to Nico Robin. The only downside is like if you're still playing Nami in set 2, This is not searchable. Nico Robin is. So that's the one thing you'll have to kind of, you know, weigh against itself. Then we have Blenheim. We have a 2/3, just a blocker. So he does not have counter power. Neither does Chopper, to be honest. But if you wanted to play more blockers, I mean, the first blocker I'd probably go to is Chopper because he only costs 1 as opposed to this thing costing 2. But still, if you want more defensive blocker type cards, this might be the way to go. And then we have a secret rare for the set. So we have a 7-drop ace. 7/7 we have on play. Give 2 of your opponent's characters minus 3k during this turn. Then if your leader's type includes Whitebeard Pirates, this character gains rush during this turn. So this is, again, another cool combo you can do with the 9-drop Whitebeard, because you can use Whitebeard's effect to kill something that you minused with this ace, and this ace also will gain rush, which is pretty good. So yeah, it seems like a solid secret rare to play in the deck. At 7, again, it seems like you're playing a lot of bombs in this Whitebeard deck, and we've seen how much Ben Beckman has picked up in like red Luffy decks, for example. So 7-drop seems to be like a sweet spot. Obviously 7k is a little bit weaker than Ben Beckman's 9k, but the fact this thing gains rush is pretty insane. And by the time set 2 comes out, man, there are going to be a lot of options in the rush category for Whitebeards specifically to play. Again, Zoro, 5-cost Luffy, Shanks, the Jozu guy we read before, this guy. There's gonna be a lot of rush potential in Whitebeard depending on how you build your deck. Then we have the nice alternate art for it and the manga version as well, which will be the chase card from the set. And then we have Whitey Bay. We have a 1/2 with a 1k counter. Dawn 1, this character can also attack your opponent's active cards. So this is pretty decent seeming for picking off blockers, although you'd have to wait a whole turn because it has to be able to attack in order to get that value. But again, solid turn 1 play. Answers blockers, answers Bonnies, answers Momonosuke's, for example. That seems like a pretty cool thing. Then we have Makino. So we have a 1 cost, 0 power, 2k counter. Activate main. You may rest this character and up to one of your red characters with a cost of 1. Gains plus 3k during this turn. So I believe I've also seen a lot of red Zoro lists playing this card as well. And that's actually really good because it's basically going to cost you 1 Dawn and 1 slot on your board in order to buff something by 3k. So that's a really good rate in terms of like Dawn giving power, and it's 2k counter as well. So it's almost like a Otama in that sense, where it's more of like a support card, but it also has good defensive value. But this card has really good offensive value. So yeah, this makes sense to be a staple in red in my opinion. Then we have Magurus. We have a 2k with 1k counter. On play, up to one of your red characters with a cost of 1 gains 3k power during this turn. Again, similar thing to Makino. This is a bit more of a relevant attacker. You can equip some Dawn to it, especially in the Zoro deck, where that leader will buff this thing up by 1k, and it has a counter value, so can be used defensively. Not a bad card. I don't know if it's better than Makino though, but the problem is Makino can't really be bounced back to your hand super effectively, so you'd rather invest something into the board that actually has a power presence. But in Law, for example, Makino actually seems really good because you can bounce her back to your hand after buffing one of your characters, so that's one upside to consider. Then we have Masked Deuce. We have a 2/3 with a 2k counter, and then Dawn 2 when attacking, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost 2000 power or less. So just a bit of a weaker Nico Robin, you know, fine card if you need it for a certain meta, if you need it for a certain meta. Otherwise I don't see this thing doing too much, but it is a 2k counter, and in this game we need to play a certain amount of 2k counters, so this could be one of your options for that. Then we have the alternate art for this. And then we have Marco. So we have a 4/5 with 1k counter. He is a blocker, and then on KO you may trash 1 card with a type including Whitebeard Pirates from your hand, and if you have 2 or less life, play this character from your trash rested. That is a really cool effect. So it's a form of like protection on the card that, you know, it doesn't say like this card can't be removed or anything like that, but it is essentially saying like you can get that board presence back immediately, which is super important. It does come back in rest mode though, which makes it vulnerable to being attacked, but then again it just blocks another attack that would have went at your leader, because the thing about One Piece competitively is you cannot let your opponent overwhelm you in board presence, and this is a card that helps Whitebeard fight back for board presence. This is a really good card. I'm sure it'll be a staple in the Whitebeard deck at the 4-drop slot for sure. Then we have the alternate art for this as well. And then we have Rakuyos. We have a 3-drop 4k with a 1k counter. Dawn 1, your turn. All your characters with type, including Whitebeard, gain 1000. So it's kind of like a character card giving you a Zoro leader type of effect. You have to invest 3 Dawn into it. There are probably going to be better cards to play, but this might be one to keep your eye on if you want to go for like some sort of like lower to the ground Whitebeard rush strategy. But I feel like Whitebeard's thing is going to be sticking bigger battle cards that are harder for your opponent to deal with, in my opinion, at least just from reading these cards initially. Then we have Little Oars Jr., just a 7.9, so a budget alternative to Ben Beckman. People will be happy about that. I think Ben Beckman right now is like $5 a copy because it does come from a promo pack. And then we have Seaquake. So this is a event card for the deck. We have main. If your leader's type includes Whitebeard, KO one of your opponent's characters with 3,000 or less for a 1-drop. That's actually a pretty decent thing. But again, this just makes me wish we had sideboarding in the game, because you might want this against like a blocker heavy deck, but you don't really want to main this card just for the opportunity to maybe kill a blocker in some matchups. You want to bring it in when it's most relevant, which is kind of annoying. Then we have the trigger effect. Give one of your opponent's leaders or characters minus 3,000 during this turn, so it can prevent you from taking a little bit of aggro if it happens to be in your life. Then we have the Whitebeard Pirates. We have 1 cost main. Look at top 5 of your deck, reveal 1 character including Whitebeard, and add it to your hand, and place the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. And then trigger, activate this card's main effect. So it's basically the equivalent of in 2 years, but for the Whitebeard archetype specifically. And yeah, searching Jozu, searching your Whitebeard Boss card just adds a lot more consistency to the deck. And this deck doesn't really have like a 1-drop Nami type of card, so this might just be like a 4 of, where you want to start this turn 1, fix your hand up, and if you hit it out of life, all the better. Then we have You May Be a Fool, But I Still Love You. This is a really interesting, awesome scene from the anime. So we have a 1-drop main. If your life's at 3 or less, you cannot add life to your hand using your own effect during this turn. And then trigger, up to one of your leader cards gets plus 1,000 for the turn. So the trigger's not too bad if it happens to be there. But okay, so this is a 1-cost event. So you can actually combo this with Squared, because I don't think his effect is like a cost to take a life. It's just that after you use the effect, you have to take a life. So if this thing is preventing you from taking life, Squared's effect should resolve normally, except for that downside. So if you want to combo it with, like, you know, playing Whitebeard on a given turn and then playing this plus Squared, it is a pretty specific 3-card combo that's honestly going to be pretty hard to pull off, because One Piece is not the most consistent game out there right now. So that's one thing I would definitely hazard you towards, like, don't really play for this combo, and that unfortunately is going to probably make this card not all that great. But you know, we might need it if we need like a long game version of Whitebeard, for example. That could possibly work, so we'll see how that ends up working out. Then we have Moby Dicks. So we have a 2-cost stage. Your turn. If you have 1 or less life, your Edward Newgate and all your characters with a type including Whitebeard gain plus 2,000 power. That's actually wild. That is going to be a way to just drown your opponent out. Like, eventually with all that additional power, like your leader being 8k and your other characters gaining 2k for free, that's going to cause your opponent to have to counter with way more cards from their hand, or have way more blockers, and eventually you're just going to drown them out. They're going to just run out of cards to defend themselves with and probably lose the game. This has the problem though of being a stage, and we all know that you know, the Going Merry didn't really see much play in competitive One Piece. This one seems to be a little better though, because I don't remember if the Going Merry had a trigger to play it. This one having the trigger is nice, but you really don't want to play 4 copies of this, because at any point if it hits your hand, or extra copies hit your hand I should say, it's just immediately a dead card. Like, people will know that problem with Onigashima. That is a big issue if your hand just has this card dead sitting in it. And we don't really have a discard outlet in this deck from what I've seen, so yeah, I don't know. Do you play 4 Moby Dick? Do you play 2? Do you play 3? That's going to be something to definitely determine during your testing. And that pretty much wraps up all the cards. So overall, I mean, I think a lot of them are powerful. I'm actually very personally excited for the Whitebeard Leader as well as Jozu, because another rusher, and the rusher having 2k counter seems insane to me. Ace SCR seems good in this deck as well. Comboing it to get removal with your 9-drop, this card also just seems insane. And then you can just load your deck with like the generic red cards from set 1 as well. So you could probably play a pretty like streamlined Straw Hat deck with this Whitebeard Leaders, like play Nami, search a good majority of your deck, like your Zoro Rush, your Luffy Rush, but also just play like the Whitebeard top end, like Whitebeard 9. You could play again like Ace, you can play the Jozu, and that could just potentially be all the Whitebeard stuff you play. And you can try some other things here and there, but that's what I'm going to probably start testing once I start testing One Piece set 2. But anyways, guys, of course, I want in the comments below what you think about what I've talked about here. Let me know in the comments below if you have different takes. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.